Jack Della Maddalena is absolutely rolling, and with Rookie of the Year honors in sight, coming off of 2 first-round knockout wins to start off his UFC career, he's going to look to try and cap off a busy 2022 with a win over Hot Chocolate Danny Roberts, which is sometimes easier said than done, because for Danny Roberts, you look at his overall body of work in the UFC, he's been around for a time or two. 7-5 with the promotion, 2 fight of the nights, 1 over Dominic Steele, where he ends up getting dropped, and then he just rallies, has a great fight in that one, and a fight of the night as well against David Zavada back in 2018. And for Roberts, his last number of fights, his last 5, he is 2-3 in those fights, but you consider it, loses against Hannibal Claudio Silva by submission. If you're going to lose to Claudio Silva, probably by submission. He welcomed in Michel Pereira to the UFC. Pereira said, "Thank you very much. I'm going to finish you by flying knee." He beat Salim Imadaev in a fight where he was just really well-rounded. Looked great in that one almost 3 years ago. Beats Ramazan Emeev by split decision. He shouldn't have won that fight. He lost the first 2 rounds. Third round, what happened to Emeev? He becomes a kickboxer. He does. And in that one, Roberts looked good in the third round. And if Dominic Cruz was a judge, I mean, the third round really leaves a good impression in the judge's mind. So that's how fights are judged. And then his last time out, he loses against Francisco Trinaldo. But for Danny Roberts in this matchup, taking on Jack Della Maddalena, he can really pull a lot out of the opponents that he's taken on in the past. Boxing heavy guys that aren't really that tall for the weight class. A guy like Jack Della Maddalena might be a little reminiscent of the body type of a guy like Salim Imadaev, or like Mike Perry, a guy he's fought in the past.
You're not wrong at all, but I will be curious to see, because I was someone who thought, okay, Danny Roberts can occupy one of those action fighters in 170 space, where this is the type of fight that eventually you're going to find yourself in.
Like a Nico Price or Randy Brown or Luke
Tim Means, Max Griffin. Like, there's a lot of guys in this division who kind of find themselves in that space right now, but Danny Roberts is kind of one of those fighters. Until he fought Francisco Trinaldo, and I thought the volume of Danny Roberts was really going to impress in that fight. I thought that was going to be the one thing that was going to help him, because Trinaldo does have great power, even though he's had this weird late career resurgence. We all know how shifty he is and how he can hit those pullback left hands, but the thing about Trinaldo is he's not a very active fighter. He never has been. When he was 23, he wasn't an active fighter, so now that he's 43, that hasn't changed either. Danny Roberts didn't really get out of second gear in that fight, though, and that's something that, okay, if we saw Danny Roberts from 4 years ago in this fight against Jack Della Maddalena, then okay, he might get into a fight of the night, he might get into a brawl, that might be to his detriment, but at least I think he's going to land a couple of his own shots. I just don't know if that's the Danny Roberts we're going to see, because, and again, I can be wrong, I don't know if he is that fighter anymore. I can see him going out there and having a couple flashes, but I don't know if he's willing to really bite down on the mouthpiece and get into that type of fight with Jack Della Maddalena, because let's be honest, if he does, it's probably not going to be a long night. Della Maddalena might not be the most skilled or technical fighter when you really think about him on like an Alex Pereira level or a Bo Nickel level for prospects, but he's a pretty good mixed martial artist who really has a well-rounded skill set. He's tough when he has to be tough. He's technical when he has to be technical. Like, he has a prospect that you can get excited about, and I think those are the type of prospects who tend to look good against fighters like Danny Roberts. Although, Danny Roberts, when you do kind of count him out, that's when he can go into his pocket, pull out another fight of the night.
Well, if you do look at it for Jack Della and you consider, I mean, who's he going to struggle with? It's going to be those guys that really pressure, get in his face, and threaten with a lot of the takedowns. You look at his fight against Angelosa, and it was just all over the place. It was a fight of the night. Della ends up getting a contract, but it's one of those ones that, hey, Ange, get another fight out there, we'll bring you in, and that's exactly what they did. So for Della, that's a great win to have in your back pocket, but even the fights that he had on the regional scene, when there were guys that would get into the phone booth, withstand some of that power, work the takedowns, that's when his opponents would have success. And you know the story already about Della. He went 0-2 to start his career, losing by finish, told his coach he'd win 10 in a row, end up in the UFC, and gosh darn it, didn't he do it.
Pretty impressive.
But for Della, yeah, I mean, beating Pete Rodriguez on short notice is one thing when you do Wardley Alves, but going out his last time out against Ramzan Emeev, who, like, half his body was sunburnt, it was a really weird look for Emeev, but landing the body shot, getting the finish, he really did look good in that matchup, and I was surprised because Emeev normally turns into a kickboxer as his fights go on, but Emeev decided to be a kickboxer, and he did get the takedown. And then Della ended up really doing well in the scramble, getting back up to his feet and continuing to do his own thing.
And I was impressed by the way in which he was able to handle Emeev, because like you had said, Emeev's a guy who you can win against. Very rarely you look good against him when you do beat him, though. You are going to have to withstand some of that wrestling. Yes, if you do withstand that big storm, if you can defend the grappling, you can look good and have your opportunities to win it late. But the fact that we saw Della Maddalena go to the body, go to the head, withstand some of the adversity with some of the wrestling, that gave me more confidence in him moving forward it than if he just went in there and knocked him out with the first punch. Because, again, Amiva's one of those guys, you can look at his record and kind of scoff at him, but I really do think beating a guy with his skill set is a very impressive thing for a guy to do so young in Maddalena's career.
The former M1 Global middleweight champ, Ramzan Ami, both these guys with the success there. One guy's win definitely holds a lot more water than the other, but if you look at Della when he strikes and compare him to Danny Roberts is going to throw a much more varied attack to all three levels with his boxing and his kicks. He does throw a lot of head kicks, a lot of body kicks, and for Della, he will switch stances quite a bit, but it really is a boxing-heavy attack. He's got nice leg kicks, but when he's working from orthodox, it really is the left hook that he likes to land. Then he'll switch to southpaw, left straight down the middle, and it is one of those things that reminds me a lot of a guy like Dustin Poirier, the right-hand dominant southpaw. For Della, it is that left hand all the time, even though he is switching stances quite a bit. So something to look out for in the matchup. And the thing for Danny Roberts, too, you mentioned it, and this is kind of one of my points. For Danny Roberts, really low in terms of volume against Trinaldo, who you would have thought on the outside he'd have a lot of success against him, even 100%. If Trinaldo's trying to crash the distance himself and pushing a pace. But if you look at it for Roberts, over his UFC tenure in 12 fights, 3.13 strikes landed per minute to 3.32 absorbed. UFC average is 3.4. He's below average in both categories, so we'll see what he's able to do here. He's training in England at, Aspire Combat Sports Academy, not in Florida for this camp. He's been out of, at the time, Sanford, now Killcliff FC. So we'll see how he's able to make out here, getting that training back at home. But when we have a look at the odds in this one, not particularly close. Della open a minus 335 favorite, minus 460 right now. Roberts open plus 275, plus 340. Bringing it home with the Topology vote. Surprise to us there, to you. I'm going to say Della's probably a big favorite. I'm going to say over under 85% Della Maddalena.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over. Oh my goodness. 550 total votes, 96% Della Maddalena, 86% by knockout for the 4% that have Roberts, 45% by decision, 40% by knockout. I think Della wins the fight, but my goodness, I'm surprised where the fan vote is.
It's just, the way that Della fights is kind of that car crash mentality of, I will eat a shot to give a shot. Danny Roberts doesn't really have that level of durability at this stage in his career, I don't think, to get into that kind of a fight. And he's not a good enough wrestler to just decide, oh, we're not striking right now. Because like you said, when Della is going to face adversity, is you're going to either have to bring the fight to him and really pressure him and make him feel uncomfortable, or pressure him with your wrestling and not allow him to really initiate his own boxing combinations. Roberts can go for takedowns, but he's not a specialist in that regard by any means. So I don't think he's a good enough grappler for grappling's sake. I think he can make it competitive in some spots, but I like the striking out of Della quite a bit in this fight.
To me, going back and watching that fight that Mike Perry had, Perry withstood a lot of damage in that fight, and then he just kept coming forward. He lands that hand, wobbles Danny Roberts, and he grabs his head and slams it into his knee, and he gets the knockout. But for Roberts, he's been dropped by Dominic Steele, Mike Perry, Nordin Taleb, and Michelle Pereira. So for me, I have Jack Della Maddalena, the varied attack, the boxing combinations, the power, and the speed, and he tends to have a pretty decent gas tank. So both of us going with Jack Della in the matchup. Let us know who you have down below in the comment section. Some big fights left on this card, including a main event between Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.